something like freedom. So, say India gained political independence 70, 80 years ago. America gained something 200 years ago. So that is freedom. So you're using that in the sense. That's true. That's one sense of the word. Free will. Now, how many of you think that we have free will, and how many of you think we don't have free will? How many of you think we have free will? Okay. How many of you think we don't have free will? Okay. Thank you. So, what about those who didn't raise either time hand? We have free will within the boundaries. Okay. We have free will covered by some covering, by conditionings. Okay. So, I was doing this exercise. So one person said, I don't have the free will to answer this question on free will. So, okay, let's take it down to a more practical level, this question of free will. If we consider a condition like addiction, say it could be, say, alcoholism. So broadly, there are two different views of looking at any addiction. One is that it is a moral deficiency. Moral deficiency means that it is a person who is not using their free will properly. No, you just have to buck up. You have to be more responsible. You are being immoral when you are succumbing to alcoholism. You are succumbing to a particular habit. So that's a moral deficiency. That's one view. And then the other view is that it is a medical disorder. Now, we say it's a medical disorder. Say if I have got cough and I start coughing. Somebody tells me, your cough is disrupting everyone. Don't cough. Just use your willpower. Well, you can't really use willpower for very long. You can. Suppose somebody has got some digestive disorder. And they suggest, okay, hold on. How long can you hold on, isn't it? So, how many of you think that alcoholism is a moral deficiency, and how many of you think it's a medical disorder? Moral deficiency? Okay. Medical disorder? Okay. Sorry? It's somewhere in the middle? Okay. That's the safest answer, generally speaking. So, yes. Sorry?
I guess the moral deficiency caused it to become a medical condition. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it. So, thank you. I think so we all, okay, let's put alcoholism aside. Let's take something like anger. If somebody just yells and screams and uses foul language and maybe slaps someone, punches someone, and then after that they say that, what can I do? I'm just short-tempered. Would we accept that as a reasonable explanation? No, isn't it? Okay, you may have anger issues, but you need to be able to control yourself, isn't it? So, once we start going in the direction of pathologizing behavior, pathologizing means saying that it is any kind of improper behavior is a pathological condition. That means it's like a medical disorder which is beyond my control. Then where do we draw the line? Like there is alcoholism, there is what is called a shopaholism. Shop till you drop. Or shop till your bank account drops. Whichever way. So, now can we say that I have my shopaholism is a medical disorder? Now, okay, we might say that, but then does that mean that everything can be just called a medical disorder? So, this is where things get a little blurred. So, we'll try to understand. I'll talk about three things with respect to the free will, First is the concept. Then I'll talk about the condition. Condition means the state. And then finally, change. So we'll talk about 3 ways in which you can bring about the change. So with respect to concept, there is, the Gita offers us a model of the self. And that model is basically 3 level. At our core, we are spiritual beings. We are souls. Now around that soul is a subtle body, which can be referred to in shorthand as a mind. And then there is the physical body, what we call as the body. And then there is the broad outer world within which we function. So at one level, free will is an innate feature of the soul. Every person, every individual, at their core is a soul. And as a soul, every soul has swecha, has the capacity for making one's own desires and then acting according to those desires. So free will itself is an innate and inalienable feature of every soul. However, while the free will is never taken away, I'll talk about 2 terms over here, freedom and willpower. Now, can the freedom of a person be taken away? Well, it depends on what we mean, but can we say a prisoner has freedom? Not really. At least at a physical level, a prisoner has to be in the premises of the jail. If they are sentenced to solitary confinement, they may not even be able to come out of the particular cell they are in. So, freedom is in the physical domain. So, our freedom can be taken away by conditions, by external situations. That means, now does a prisoner have free will? Yes, of course, they still have free will. So, in the jail, the prisoner can decide whether to mix with other hardened criminals and become a worse criminal by the time they come out. Or they can join some rehabilitation programs, maybe learn something, learn some skills by which when they come out, they can have some means for better living. So definitely free will is there. So we could say the capacity to exercise the free will over the external domain, that can be limited by external situations. Now that can happen even when, say, if we are trapped in an elevator. Then our physical domain, the freedom gets limited. So now sometimes, so the difference between free will and freedom is relatively easy to understand. But similarly, there is a difference between free will and willpower. So willpower is what applies to the mental domain. That means even an alcoholic can have the free will to desire that I will give up alcoholism. But as soon as they see a bottle of alcohol, they may give up their desire to give up. As Oscar Wilde said, giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I have done it over 100 times. So, sometimes at the mental domain, there can be conditionings. And those conditionings can, just as physical conditions can limit the degree to which we can act on our free will. Similarly, mental conditionings can limit the extent to which we can even internally act out on our free will. I may desire that, okay, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do this. Say, I'm not going to get angry. But then, when the provocation comes up, then that person may succumb. So, what exactly happens over here? So that means free will, willpower, and freedom. There are three distinct concepts. So, we always have free will, but sometimes external conditions can take away our will, freedom, and sometimes internal conditionings can take away or decrease our willpower. So let's try to understand what do we mean by internal conditionings and what do they do. So our mind is like a software, and it's like a programmed software. So every action that we do, if you consider these three levels of three domains, let's focus on the physical and the mental, and below this is the spiritual domain. So every action that we do at the physical domain, it has some external consequence, but it also has an internal consequence. That internal consequence is that an impression is formed. So for example, somebody may grow up in a very cultured and responsible family where parents tell the kids, don't smoke, don't drink. Now the kid may go to a college or party and may drink or may smoke. And before they come back, maybe they take some mint or take some substance by which the smell goes away. And they maybe become a little sober before they come back. So they say, I didn't get any consequence. I got away with it. Well, not really. Sometimes we may be able to dodge the external consequences of our actions. But there is an internal consequence that we can never dodge. And that internal consequence is that impression is formed inside. And from that impression, a proposition comes up. And that proposition, when we accept it, that leads to repetition of the action. And that repetition will create a further impression. So, to understand this, the software example is fairly simple. Have any of you heard of this small thing in India? So, suppose someone has visited a website called Bollywood.com. Maybe they visited 1 time, 5 times, 10 times, 50 times, and say they come to a spiritual talk like this. And they hear about the Bhagavad Gita. They say, I want to find out, what is this Bhagavad Gita? So, they open their browser and start typing Bhagavad Gita. They type B. And what happens? Now, Bollywood.com comes as a autocomplete. Now, they didn't want to visit Bollywood.com, but it just comes as autocomplete. So, whenever a slight trigger comes, then it just immediately comes as autocomplete. Now, they can still visit bhagavadgita.com. But, here, they have to type 12 full letters. Isn't it? There, it's just one letter and enter. So, the choice of Bollywood is much easier, not because the computer or the phone is biased against them, but it's the device itself the software is amoral. Amoral means it is not immoral, it is not moral, it is simply functional. Whatever is fed to it, that's what will come out. That's what will come as a proposition. So, our conditionings are like that. So, if somebody has drunk once, then that impression is stored inside. And once that impression is stored inside, next time, whenever there is a party anywhere, you just say, hey, let's drink. That proposition will come. And that proposition will come with, over a period of time, more and more force. Over time, it can even become an addiction. So when it becomes like an addiction, it's like Bollywood.com is not just the autocomplete when you type B. Bollywood.com is the home page when you just touch the browser. So like that, somebody who's a total alcoholic, say, as soon as they wake up, they first thought, where is the bottle? And the last thing they do before sleeping, they drink, and then maybe some alcohol slips over their, spills over their face, and then they go to sleep. So that's become like the default home page. So essentially, the more we repeat an action, the more times a person has visited Bollywood.com, the more that is likely to come as autocomplete. So, now coming back to our earlier point to us, is say alcoholism a moral deficiency or is it a medical disorder? So let's try to use this model to understand this. So, a few years ago, I had gone to Calgary and I was giving a talk, I was invited to give a talk on top of a university. So, not in a university which is on top of a hill, not on top of a university, but so while we were going up the university, we saw how snowballs are formed. So, at the top, it is actually a snow pebble. It's tiny. And a person could just flip it with their leg and crack apart. But as it starts coming down, it starts becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, till eventually it can become so big that the same person who could earlier have just cracked it apart, that person may get cracked apart by that snowball. You can say here it's a snow boulder, not a snowball over here. A giant snow boulder. So, for us, whatever habits we have formed, whatever compulsive tendencies we have, so at this point, when it's initially starting, it's a moral deficiency. We can say no at that point. But eventually, when it has become so big, it is become like a medical. Now, medical disorder doesn't mean that there is some pill that we can pop and it will get cured. Medical disorder simply means that, the way I am using the term is, that willpower alone is not enough. Just like if I got cough, to stop coughing, willpower alone is not enough. There is a process required for that. So some people may just by willpower decide, I'm going to give this up, and they will just give it up. But some people, by willpower, they may not be able to give it up. That's because the conditionings within them may have become much stronger. So we all have these boulders inside us, which push us and crush us at times. So the Sanskrit word for impressions is samskar. Now samskar you can also write in English as samskar. Every one of us has some or the other scar in our psyche. For some people, it may be anger. For some people, it may be lust. For some people, it may be greed. There are different kinds of cravings. So, at this point, depending on the level of the conditionings in a person. So, we could say here, the free will is very free. Our topic was how to free our free will. But here the free will may be hardly free. Here you can say it's largely free, here it's hardly free. That person may not be able to say no at all. So now does that mean we are doomed? If we have come to the level where the snow boulder has become so big that we just can't do anything about it, does that mean that we are doomed? Not necessarily. This will be the last part of the talk. So, now in the Ramayana, there is the description of one character who symbolizes lust. Who is that? Ravana. Now, if we consider Ravana, there are actually two incidents. When the idea of abducting Sita is brought before him. The first is when Ram destroys the entire regiment of the Rakshasas in the place called Janasthan, where Khara, Dushan and Trishira, very powerful demons are there. Lord Ram, 40,000 of all of them, he single-handedly destroys. It's a stupendous display of archery, not just excellence, but super excellence. And none of the demons there can even believe the idea that this one human being who is less than half of our size can even kill one of us, what to speak of all of us. So they just, one after another, keep rushing towards Ram, and Ram's arrows just fell, all of them. But there is one demon who does not rush in. His name is Akampan. He's Akampan, but when he sees the power of Ram, he starts doing Kampan. Akampan means one who never trembles, one who is fearless. But he starts trembling, and he just runs away from there. And he runs. Like some people, when you are afraid, you run till you get to safety. We may run from some dark place to a more well-lit place, from a lonely place to a crowded place. But he's so scared that he just runs, keeps running all the way from Janasthan to Lanka itself. And finally, when he comes to Lanka, he composes himself. And at that time, he tells Ravana what has happened. Now, his first thought is, I don't want to die, I want to protect myself. I want to make sure that Ram is not on my heels. Then he thinks, okay, now I have to inform Ravana. Sometimes kings, especially tyrannical kings, can shoot the messenger itself. So he had one fear of Ram earlier, now he has fear of Ravan. What to do? Then he's trembling. He says, "Oh king, please do not be angry with me, but I have to give you some terrible news." He says, "What happened? Tell me." Ravan says. And then he says that your entire army has been destroyed. He says, "Who dare destroy this?" Ravan is angry, even if he's not angry with Akampan. He says, "Who dare? Was it the army of all the gods combined together that they fell upon my regiment? Who else will have the audacity?" He said, it was just one human being. What? How is that possible? He said, this human being, I have never seen anyone with such skill in archery. His skill and speed was just stunning. Nobody could face him. He says, I will go right there and teach him a lesson. Anybody who dares to destroy my army will be destroyed. Kampan says, my dear Lord, I saw his prowess. And sometimes there are some things which we may not speak to those who are in a power of authority, because it may seem as a little disrespectful or challenging of their power. But we hint at them. And if they are also a little, they understand this. Says this, dear Lord, he's a human being and he's extraordinarily powerful. So it may not be safe to face him directly. So Ravan gets the signal, what he says. So what do you say? Should I just take this insult and do nothing? He says, no, I have a suggestion. He said that he is a prince and he is in the forest, but he seems to be very attached to his wife. That's why he has brought her with him to the forest. So if you can abduct his wife, then he will become emotionally overwrought. And then you can destroy him, or you can lure him to your kingdom. And when he comes there, then you can destroy him. Okay. This is where everybody has desires. The difference between the divine and the demoniac is not that the divine have desires and the demoniac have desires and divine don't have desires. Even divine people have desires. But the key difference is those who are demoniac, they don't respect boundaries. Now, everybody, for example, may want to make money. But the demoniac may not hesitate to lie or rob or even kill for the sake of getting money. So they don't respect boundaries. We'll come back to this point of boundaries a little later. But, so he goes and he says, I will use Maricha. And when he goes to Maricha and he tells about his plan, Maricha is sitting he has become like a yogi and he's sitting in meditation. And as soon as he hears the name Ram, he says, no. He says, what enemy of yours has put in your mind the idea of going against Ram? He said, I have seen the power of Ram. No one in the three worlds can match his power. Please don't anger him in any way. Please let things remain the way they are. Now, Maricha is also a powerful warrior. And at this point, Ravan actually decides to go back. So, then after that, Shurpanakha comes. And when Shurpanakha comes, she initially tries to again anger Ravan. She says, just see my condition. They have disfigured me. They have humiliated me. And through that they have humiliated you. What kind of king are you? That you are letting your own sister be disfigured like this. Now, Ravan is also, he's a politician. He's shrewd to some extent. He understands what Shurpanakha is trying to do. So he says, it was you who went and messed with them first. It was you who went and attacked them first. They didn't attack you. So if you didn't want to be injured, why did you go and mess with them? He's basically trying to get off the hook without seeming to be weak. So this is where Shurpanakha starts telling her own story. There are lies which are completely opposite to the truth. Those lies are very easy to expose. But the most dangerous lies are those which start with truth and end with truth. But in between they go everywhere else. Now what does that mean? That these lies stick to the facts, but they give a different spin to the facts. So she said, yes, I went there. And I did approach Ram. But you know why I went there? It was for your sake. So now what had happened was, she had initially gone there out of a carnivorous desire. Carnivorous means the desire to eat flesh. In fact, you can say even a cannibalistic desire. She wanted to eat human flesh. But when she came there and she saw Ram, and his figure was so regal and so handsome and so powerful, that her carnivorous desire became a carnal desire. So, carnal is sensual desire. Her lunchbox became her love interest. Or you can say lust interest, whatever. But she completely neglected this, and the story she told was, actually, I came to know that Ram has a very beautiful wife, Sita. And I felt that such a beautiful woman should be adorning your palace. So I went there to get Sita for you. As I said, this was a complete distortion of the truth. But it was not a distortion of the facts. That's why something can be factual and still be untruthful. Now, how is it possible? See, facts are external events. So, in terms of facts, you see, I went there, but untruthful means in terms of motives, it can be completely false. So, factual and truthful are not always the same thing. Anyway, then she started describing Sita's beauty in extremely explicit and enticing terms. And then Ravana's eyes opened wide with predatory interest. And that's when Shurpanakha knew, I've got him now. So, then he went to Maricha, and then he said that if you don't help me, then I will kill you. So, first time he said no to the plan. Second time he said yes. That means he also had the capacity to say no. But he chose to say yes. So everybody has free will. Now in this case, you could say there was an external warning that came. And first he accepted the external warning, second time he did not. But nobody can say that my conditioning is so strong that I have no free will at all. Or even nobody can say that I have no willpower at all. We always have. Everybody has some willpower. What I mean that is, it's a matter of boundaries. So somebody may say that, okay, whenever I get the urge to drink, I just can't stop drinking. I have to drink. Okay, that may be true. But there are a lot of people who may drink and they may be compulsive drinkers. But still, they may be sober enough to recognize that if I drink, I'm not going to drive after drinking. Isn't it? So, I was giving this class to a group of American university students. And then one of the students came and told me that he has now become a spiritually minded person. He says that, you can say, he had come to know about the three modes, Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. So he said that even drinking, when we go for drinking, it's like Sattvic drinking. I said, how can drinking be Sattvic? So he said, that means, say, if a group of 6 kids are going to go to drink, then one of them will decide, or they will decide, one of you, today is your day of tapasya. Today you should not drink, because you're going to drive us back and forth. Next time when we go for drinking, it is your day of tapasya. And now, they say you're going for drinking, it's indulgence. But at least they have that sobriety, that if I'm going to drink, I should not be driving. So everybody, now somebody's sense of boundary might be that I'll not drink at all. Somebody's sense of boundary, I'll not drink so much that I can't be coherent in my speaking. Somebody say, if I'm going to drink, I'm not going to drive. If I have to drive, I'm not going to drink. So everybody has some sense of boundaries. So the sense of boundaries can come, so some boundaries can come from conscience. That means, oh, this is the wrong thing to do. Some boundaries can come from consequence. Conscience means internally only I feel like this is a bad thing, I should not be doing this. Consequence may be external. So there can be fear of consequence. But the point is, everybody has some sense of boundaries. Now, the stronger our conditionings become, the worse become the boundaries. The more and more malleable, changeable, violable the boundaries become. Say suppose somebody gets drunk and drives for the first time. Then what will happen? Next time, last time I got away, this time also will get away. So then they will keep drinking like that. Once a person was going way above the speed limit and the cop pulled him over. He says, didn't you see the speed limit sign? He says, I saw the speed limit, I just didn't see you. So, some people may think that if I can just get away with the consequence, then there is no problem. But the point is that we may get away from the consequence once or twice, but we won't get away each time. And that is where the problem comes up. So we all have free will, and that free will, the willpower to use that free will properly can become stronger or weaker based on how we use it. But everybody has some boundaries. And that is where our hope lies. Everybody has. Now somebody may think that these boundaries are so much that there's so little that they has to be insignificant. Somebody may say, oh, I just can't give up eating meat. Okay, but maybe they get a heart attack and doctor says, give up red meat. Okay, I'll give up red meat. Because they think, okay, the price of losing my life is too much. I like meat, but I like my life even more. So when that consequence comes up, they're ready to give up. So this I'll talk about the last part now. I said how to free our free will. So I till now talked about what the idea of free will. Then that we have conditionings within us which can limit our capacity to access our free will. That is, our willpower may be less or more. But we always can change this. So how do we change it? Broadly, in 635, Krishna talks about two things, Abhyasa and Vairagya. So Abhyas and Vairagya. That the mind's conditionings can be changed in these two ways. So Vairagya is basically boundaries. So each one of us has to create some boundaries for ourselves. So now some boundaries could be physical. Say if somebody is a recovering alcoholic and their house is right next to a bar, then there'll be no bar for them to go to the bar. They'll just, so then what do? Okay, if I'm really serious about recovering, then maybe I cannot stay so close to this. So there'll be physical boundaries. If somebody tends to say, spend too much time on social media, then maybe decide that I'll not have social media on my phone. Maybe I can have it only on my laptop. So only when I'm there, I'll use it. So each one of us has to decide which kind of boundaries we create. Now, what the boundaries are not the ultimate solution, but they are a vital first solution. Krishna also talks about this in 341, Tasmattam Indriyanyadav. Why? Because when the propositions come up, you remember? Because of the impressions, the propositions come up. So when Bollywood.com comes as autocomplete, at that time, it's relatively easy to just press enter and go there. So we need to, that which is, we are very likely to do because of our conditionings, we need to make it more difficult for ourselves. So difficult could mean, so what conditionings make easy, that boundaries can make difficult. And now why do we want to make it difficult? Because that urge, when it comes, it doesn't stay all the time. It comes, it stays for some time, like anger. Anger comes, it's like a momentary insanity. At that particular moment, if I want to yell at this person, I want to beat this person, I want to do this, I want to do that. But after some time, so if you consider that it just comes, it's like a surge for some time. It goes, it may come again. But the surge, it is not all the time there. Nobody can live with anger all the time. Even alcoholism, the urge to drink, you may say it is always there. Okay, maybe it's always there. But it is not always at the same level. So there are some times when it becomes too much. Now all that we need is, if our boundary is large enough so that we can't break the boundary in the period of the urge. So then what will happen is that boundary can protect us. When the urge is very strong, at that time, if whatever we want to do is not so easily available for us. If you have an urge to, maybe at late at night, just sit and keep looking at social media or this or that. And then, okay, I decided I'm not going to keep my phone next to me on my bed. I keep it in the next room. Now, okay, that means I have to get up and go till there all the way. And sometimes we might, but sometimes it's not worth it. I'll look at the messages tomorrow. Isn't it? So create some distance. That is, creating a distance, creating a boundary is a vital step. But of course, this is not complete. This is not the complete solution. It's like something like, say, if we have an app which shows if this particular site is opened up, immediately the app closes down completely. So Bollywood.com opens up, you just close down the app. Now we can always install some other app, we can find a bypass for it. So no boundary is a permanent solution. But it's an initial protection. And then the next more important part is that I said Abhyasa and Vairagya. Abhyas is bonds. That we need to create healthier bonds for ourselves. That means that, say, if somebody just visits bhagavadgita.com, if they visit 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, then what will happen? Each time they type B, Bhagavad Gita will also come as autocomplete. Maybe it will come as the second autocomplete. Still Bollywood is the first autocomplete. But Bhagavad Gita will also come as the second autocomplete. And they just keep visiting it again and again and again and again. Then eventually that will come as the first autocomplete. So this is the great hope for us, that our mind is programmed, but it is also programmable. And we can reprogram it. So if we focus only on restricting the mind, it's like saying, oh, I won't visit Bollywood.com, I won't visit Bollywood.com. But our intention is not going to change the autocompletes of the browser, isn't it? So what will change the autocomplete is the actions, not the intentions. The intentions are good to have, but it is the actions that are important. And this is where, now how to develop these bonds, I'll talk about this, is the last part of the talk. This is the last part of the talk. Okay. So basically, the key here is repetition. All that is required for Bhagavadgita.com to come as the autocomplete is just visit Bhagavadgita.com again and again. It will come as the autocomplete. So this is where in the spiritual traditions of the world, rituals play such an important role. Now, sometimes the word rituals have a negative connotation, especially when they use the word ritualistic. That means just thoughtless, mechanical. But rituals basically, they are practices that tap the power of repetition. When we do something repeatedly, then that creates impressions in our mind. And rituals are practices which we can keep doing repeatedly. Now, there is a difference between, say, rituals and routines. Routines may say every morning when we wake up, we brush our teeth, we may take a bath, we may do our plates, we do laundry. Now, routines, the focus is on getting it done. Now, we don't have to be super attentive to the plate when we are washing it. We have to be attentive enough so that we don't break it. But we don't have to be fully attentive. The point is to get it done. But with respect to rituals, the key thing is getting the experience. So, that's why rituals, to the extent they are done consciously, they are done intentionally. To that extent, they will transform us. Because while the mind is purely mechanical, the computer browser is purely mechanical. The phone browser, it doesn't care after we visit a site how much we watch the site. Okay, you visited the site, that will go into the history. But our mind is not as mechanical as the browser. So repetition is important, but if we want to change the conditioning of our mind, we want to make our mind fitter. So you want to make it fit. There are 3 parameters for bringing about change. F is frequency. It's like how often do we do something? That's why when we do our Hare Krishna mantra japa, it is we do it repeatedly, frequently. During this trip of America, I reconnected with many of my college and school friends. So several of my friends told me that, ISKCON, I go regularly to the ISKCON temple. Okay, wonderful. How regularly? Once a year on Janmashtami. And it's good, once a year at least they're going. But that doesn't create much of an impression. We do so many things. So, how often do we do something? Frequency. But frequency alone is not enough. Second is intensity. How much are we emotionally engaged and involved while doing something? I saw one cartoon of, what is that, parallel processing, or when people do multiple tasks at the same time, multitasking. This was the cartoon of multitasking in bhakti. So it is a person is doing puja of the deities with one hand and looking at a cell phone with the other hand. Now, if somebody is doing that, that's not really going to connect them with the Lord. That's not going to create any impression. Isn't it? So intensity. How much are we involved in doing it? And then the last is the time duration. How long, how often, how intensely, and how much. So, if we create stronger impressions, then the change will happen faster. So, the mind itself is not an enemy. What is inside the mind is the enemy. Like the computer browser is not the enemy. Like I said, the browser, technology in one sense is amoral. Like that the mind is amoral. That means whatever impressions are created, those will come as propositions. So, for example, say whenever we feel a little depressed or a little discouraged, then maybe our first tendency right now is, okay, maybe open Instagram, open TikTok and look for some videos, look for some stimulation. And then sometimes we might spend a few minutes, we might spend even a few hours in that. But suppose we decide that, okay, instead of that, I will hear some spiritual music. Maybe I'll hear some kirtan. Or I'll recite some prayers, recite some verses. So, we create that as an impression. We do it consciously. We hear kirtans, we recite the mantras, we recite the shlokas. And when we keep doing this repeatedly over a period of time, these impressions will also give us propositions. Hey, when I feel bored, when I feel discouraged, the one part of it from inside will say, okay, let's go and look for something entertaining, social media. But I could say, maybe let me look for something which is also uplifting. And gradually, as these healthier impressions are formed, they will make the healthier choices easier for us. So yes, initially they will be difficult. Initially it requires effort. But that effort will not be the same throughout. It will become easier with time. And that becomes especially easier when, now this can apply to any healthy habit that we try to create. But when we try to connect with the Lord, then it is His omnipotence, it is His supreme mercy that can act as a game changer. So that means that while by mechanical repetition, the conditionings may take a long time to change. But if we are bringing the Lord into our heart, then the Lord can actually override the conditions much faster. So in that way, for all of us, when any ritual is good, but when there are devotional rituals that we develop, then these can be, they can actually bring about such a rapid change that they can actually become game changers for us in our journey towards tapping our willpower, to freeing our willpower, so that we can become truly free, so that we can do justice to our talent, so that we can better shoulder our responsibilities, so that we can make more meaningful and valuable contributions in our families, in our communities, in our society, and in the world at large. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. The topic was how to free our free will. So I discussed three broad things. First was the concept. So I talked about three things: at the level of the soul, at the level of the mind, and at the level of the body. So at the level of the soul, free will is innate to everyone. But when free will comes out at the level of the mind, that's called willpower. And when free will comes out at the physical level, that's freedom. So just as externally our freedom can be restricted by conditions, so our free will can be restricted, or other willpower can be restricted by conditionings. So we discussed over here about how the bottom of the snow, of the bottom of the mountain, top of the mountain. So the snow pebble. So at this point, our use of free will or lack of our particular habit, not doing that, is a moral deficiency. Somebody can just say no to drinking or drugs or whatever when it's proposed to them. But over a period of time, it becomes like a snow boulder. Then it becomes more like a medical disorder, in the sense that willpower alone may not be enough. But willpower alone not enough doesn't mean that it's not possible to change. It just means that some more effort is required. So then we talk about the current condition. So there I discussed about the example of the mind like a software. So as a software, every action, it creates an impression internally. And that impression leads to a proposition. So our mind already has certain conditionings because of which we all may be at different degrees of attachment or addiction with respect to different behaviors. But we discussed from Ravana's example, everybody has certain boundaries. Nobody can say that I have no willpower at all. Some people's boundaries may come from their conscience. This is wrong, I won't do it. For some people, their boundaries may come from the awareness or fear of consequence. If I do this, I'll get into trouble. Whatever way it is, we all have some awareness of boundaries. And then we discuss, if you want to change the conditioning of our mind, what do? There are two broad steps. First was, we focus on this principle of boundaries. And the boundaries, if they are just broad enough, so that when the surge happens, the urge has a surge. And if we can just have a boundary that protects us during that surge, then we will be in a better position to say no. And then the more important step is to create bonds. So bonds means we basically create by repetition. This power of repetition is tapped by rituals. And to make it more effective, we discuss this. How to make ourselves fit. What is F? Frequency. How often do we do something? I was intensity. How much are we emotionally involved and engaged when we do something? And T was time duration. How long do we do it? So, if especially we develop devotional rituals, then they can change our conditionings much faster. And therefore, for all of us, wherever we may be, change is always possible. Now, in Krishna consciousness, when we are trying to practice spiritual life, our focus in Krishna consciousness should not be how strong our conditioning is. Our focus should be on how strong Krishna is. And Krishna's strength is always stronger than any conditioning that we may have. So we focus on the strength of Krishna, then we will have that hope and confidence by which we can overcome our conditionings. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
That was not enough. You guys should clap a little bit more for Prabhu. Haribol! It doesn't sponsorship, and through that we